Here. Okay, welcome to this fun little tutorial. We're going to do some photoshopping here, learning how to create this really cool sci-fi kind of surrealist poster. The original image that we start with looks like this. So as you can see, there's quite a few changes that are going to be made to this photo. And let's get started doing that right this very second. The first thing we're going to need is all the images and all the pieces that go towards doing this tutorial. So I'm going to need you to go to your classroom website. So we need to just open up a new tab here, go to the jpcomtech.wordpress.com. Underneath Comtech 10, the photography digital processing. In this module, we have the first photo editing assignments. These are what we're working on right now. Tutorial number 1 is the one we're doing, and if you click here, it will bring up a Google Drive downloadable batch of images. These images are the ones you need for this specific tutorial, plus a few extras to give you the ability to kind of throw your own spin on it if you so choose to. But for now, this is everything you're going to need and a little bit extra. So the first thing you have to do, click on the very first image. Don't click on the image itself. Click just in the bar someplace. Hold the Shift key. Click the last image. And then right click and say download. Pretty simple concept. It is going to download these images now to your computer into your downloads folder. It creates a zip file. From here, we need to show us where this folder is. So if you click the little arrow, you can say show in folder, and it will take you to your downloads folder, wherever that might be on your computer, and you get the download. Now, as you can see, I've downloaded it like 6 times because I keep doing this tutorial over and over. Give me a second. Hello? Good. Good. How are you? Yes, no problem. Not that I know of. No. Sorry. I don't know why people... I'm not the janitor. I don't know why. I don't know. Anyways. Cool. No problem. Yep. Bye-bye. Okay. What? None of them are anywhere near downloaded. There's a lot of people who have it downloaded. What are you talking about? Anyways, you can still listen and follow along. Assuming you have downloaded the photos, you simply need to double click on this zip file that gets downloaded. Or you can, I guess actually it's easier to extract it, isn't it? Let's do it that way. If you right click on it, just like we did at the beginning of the year, we want to extract to drive, download, blah, blah, blah. It's going to make a new folder. This drive download folder that is unzipped, you just simply need to cut it or copy it. I would cut it. And then put it on your F drive with all of your other photos. And in my Block 1 class, we made a new folder that was Photoshop Project 1. So inside that folder, you can just paste all those images that you need so that you have access to them. Most of you, it looks like you're starting to download them or getting close. If you can, once you've downloaded it, open up this image 9120 is the one you need to open, and it will pop into Photoshop and it will look something like this. So once everybody gets to here, then we'll kind of keep going and have some fun. When you tried to open it, it just like did something random. Yeah, you're gonna have to like right click on it and open it in Photoshop, or go to Photoshop, say File, Open, and then find that file and open that image. So now that we have those images downloaded and you can open up your photo into Adobe Photoshop here. First thing we need to do is save this with a different name, because we don't want to wreck our original in case we made some mistakes or something. So we need to go File, Save As, and we're going to save it as a Photoshop document, of course, because that's what we're doing. And this is our Photoshop Project 1. Now, this is my Block 4 version. You don't have to put the Block 4 part. But just make sure you put a proper label on it. So you should see, if you've done it correctly, it should say Photoshop Project 1 at the top of your workspace here. That way you know that you've actually saved it, and it's hopefully not going to get lost. Okay, so first things first, this photo, we want to sort of, firstly, I want to just show you a technique. It doesn't need to be used for this photo, but it's a cool technique that we haven't talked about yet this year. The little disclaimer with it is that you can do some really creative, fun things, but you also can really distort somebody really, really bad and make their face not very attractive, and subsequently it can be really rude. It can be used in a negative light, but it's a handy little tool for here and there if you want to kind of make things a little bit more space agey or a little more alien looking like. You can create some really cool effects using the Liquify filter. So at the top, go to Filter and go to Liquify. It's normally right here. So Filter, Liquify. That's going to bring up a new dialog box. By default, it'll come up with whatever tool you had last selected. The face tool is a new tool in Photoshop. If you select the face tool, it will actually identify the person's face and facial features. And it allows you, say you wanted to make the eyes, maybe you wanted to change the distance of them, make them further apart, make them closer together. You can tilt them. So if you had one eye that you wanted to bring in, kind of like that little alien kind of looking extra tilty eye, you can change the width of a person's eyes. You can change the height of them. And you can change the overall size of the person's eye. So maybe you want it to be bigger, maybe you want it to be much smaller. Maybe the way that the picture was taken just wasn't super flattering to the person. But regardless, it will allow you to go through those. Similarly, you can monkey with face shape and overall size. You can change someone's jawline a little bit. You can make their height of their chin higher or lower. You can go crazy, do things with their forehead, right? All in all, you can manipulate somebody's face quite a bit. You can also take the forward warp tool here and do lots of crazy stuff. If I make my brush bigger just by using the right or left bracket, the square bracket, I could totally like bring this cheek in a little bit here. I can use the pucker tool or the bloat tool. Maybe I want her whole face to kind of look like it's in like a caricature mode kind of thing. You can really do some crazy stuff to a person's face. I've even seen guys use this tool. If you take the freeze mask, you could freeze this part of her shirt and down here. And then you can take the warp tool and you can literally take her whole head and like raise it up a little bit. And it does some really creepy, weird stuff, making her look like she's got like this giant long neck. Okay, this is not flattering and this is not nice, but I wanted to show you this tool just in case. It's very entertaining. I agree. It's very fun. But like I say, with great power comes great responsibility. We don't want to post memes of our friends and get ourselves in trouble. This is not an appropriate behavior in terms of trying to give somebody the best representation. So we can either cancel this, or if you were doing this for real, when you hit OK, it's kind of cool. You can use the Control Z on your keyboard. If you push Control Z, it'll go back to what it was and then back forward again, and you can kind of see the difference back and forth. I still think that the picture was really nice the way it was photographed, so we're just going to leave it like that. But I wanted to show you that one little skill that we had not talked about yet this year, because the Liquify tool can be a very handy, helpful tool if something is a little bit out of shape, or maybe the way they were standing, there's a wrinkle in their fabric of their clothes, or whatever it might be that you wanted to deal with. The Liquify tool is a very creative way to do it. So moving right along, the first step in editing this photo, funnily enough, is to take out all of the color. We actually want to make it a black and white photo to start with. So similar to when we did the tutorial at the beginning of the year with the basketball, we're going to go to our adjustments panel here, and we are going to use the Hue and Saturation Adjustment layer. So when we click on the Hue and Saturation, it's the one on the far left, it will automatically give us a new layer, a new adjustment layer, and it gives us a mask. So what that means is we can have part of the picture be black and white, part of the picture not, whatever we want to do. So under saturation, we're going to roll this all the way to -100. And that is going to give us a completely black and white image for our photo. This black and white image, we need some of the color in order to be able to do some cool things with it. But we need to, so in order to use this mask, we now need to put some of the color back in again. The easiest is to do the background and the hair. So I would do that first. So what we do is we make sure that we've selected this layer mask, so the white box here. And then the shortcut is B on the keyboard. If you select B, that will give you a brush. And then again, using the right brackets or left square bracket, you can make the brush bigger or smaller. So we need a medium-sized brush. But when I'm doing the hair and the background, I want it to be really, really soft. So I right-click and I adjust my hardness all the way down to 0. So that now, when I paint on her hair, I get a very nice soft line, and it's not super obvious where I've started and where I've stopped. And we want to make sure that we put the color back into these lights in the background, because when we try to do a color overlay later, if we don't have any color on them, it's not going to affect the lights the same. So we just want to leave basically her shirt and her skin black and white. Now, if you've gone too far, like, whoops, I've painted too much, if you click X on the keyboard, it will automatically switch from black to white, and now you'll be able to paint out whatever issue you might have had. Obviously, if you need to zoom in on your photo to give you a better idea just what exactly is colored and what is not colored. And then as well, zoom way in on her lips, and we are going to paint her lips. I like to paint them wider than I need, and then I turn around with a slightly hard brush, say a 68, 67% brush that's a little smaller, and I change it back to white, and now I can go in and take away the extra bit of color that I didn't actually need, thus creating this kind of selective color image. Now, obviously, if we were doing this for some sort of ad campaign, you would spend some time doing touch-ups on her face and whatever else. But for today, we want to focus on the techniques and not worry too much about the details. You could spend hours and hours and hours and hours editing an image like this, but we want to try and get it all done in an 80-minute block. So generally that's looking pretty good. You can always go back later and tweak it if you wanted to, but it's right on the right track in terms of getting us what we're looking for. Now, a bunch of you are going to say, what the heck, Mr. Wright? We put the color back in, but it's like yellow and red. It's not pink and purple at all. So that's because we haven't added a color overlay to the whole image yet to give us that color. So what we're going to do now is actually another hue and saturation layer stacked on top of the original, but this time, instead of adjusting the saturation, we're going to adjust the hue. Now, if you go to the right, it gives you like a blue-green kind of crazy look. If you come to the left, is when you get into the pinks and purples. I think the pink and purple looks better. It's a little more feminine than like the creepy green blue, but it's your call. You pick a color, change the color however you want. I'm going to stick with the pink, and it looks good to me. Yep. So for that, you just need to make sure that you've made it black and white. So now you need to mask out everything where you want color to show again. You need to paint with a brush. So get a big brush and make sure it's soft. So right click all the way to 0, and you're going to paint all around the top here to bring the color back in again. And make sure you're painting with black, and make sure you're on the right layer. Okay, so as you can see, that gives you a pretty cool image. So I know a lot of you are still doing the cutout part. Okay, most of you I think are getting really close to where we are here. The next step is to add on to her hand this kind of ornate tattoo graphic. Okay? Basically, what this is it's a picture, and then we use the blending modes over here to change the color and to make it blend in with her skin a little bit, and generally make it look kind of cool. We do this by making sure to start with, in order for it to work the smoothest, make sure you have your lower hue and saturation layer selected. Okay? Once you have this layer selected, we're now going to do a file, place, and we're going to place this G feather swirl image into our document. Yes, sir. Linked refers to the original. Embedded, it's just one copy of it, and then you can't, when you start scaling it, it'll wreck the quality and stuff of it. Whereas you want to place it as a linked document. That way it refers to the original. So we place that linked file in. This G feather swirl. And it'll come in as like a big, or as a tiny little blip. But you can move it over by her hand and just make it bigger. So always hold shift to drag and make it bigger. Something in this neck of the woods. If you want to rotate it a little bit, you can. It's up to you. But generally get it in the position of her hand, push enter, and there we go. We have it placed on top of that. Okay. Just so we can see better what we're doing, let's zoom in a little bit. So we grab the zoom tool, a few clicks, and now we're zoomed in on top of this image. Grab battery and stuff. If it's not purple, if it looks to be more of a like orangey color like this, it's because it's just in the wrong layer place. It needs to be underneath this hue and saturation, the top one, because the top one is what gives it the purple tone to match the hair and to match the lips and stuff, right? So make sure it's in between the two of them, and then the top one affects the next one down, basically. To make it blend and look a lot less awkward and stuff, you have to go to your blending modes here. So I know from practice that it's going to be either darken or we can use darker color, and both will work very similar. I kind of like darken. I feel like there's a few extra details here and there that work. One thing you need to do though is zoom in on this little tattoo, and depending on where it is on her hand, it's going to look a little maybe better or worse. So you can use the selection tool or V on the keyboard to kind of move it around a little bit so that it looks more natural. Like right here, this does not look real. It would normally just bend around her hand here. It wouldn't like jump across to her thumb. So you need to create a mask on this layer by clicking the little square with the circle dot in the middle, and use your brush tool, and you just want to take out a little bit of this. So using black, we're just going to paint out a little chunk of this tattoo so it looks like it wraps around her hand a little bit better, or so it looks like it stops. One or the other, your call on how it looks, but you just don't want it to jump across on top of something that normally wouldn't be skin. Otherwise it's not going to look very realistic. As well, if you've ever seen somebody with a tattoo, the colors, though they're vibrant, they're not really vibrant. They're part of this person's skin. And if we looked close here, it would look more like a henna kind of thing, where it's like ink on top, not a tattoo. You don't see any of their skin. So we actually want to take the opacity of this layer and just bring it down just a pinch, so that now we start to see, if you look close, we start to see some of the pixels of the skin showing through, and it just generally makes the image not quite as sharp and a little more natural looking. So I brought it down to 71%. You do what you think looks good, but generally that's how you would add kind of a fake tattoo to somebody. Now the cool thing about masks is I noticed that I didn't do the hair at the bottom here very well. So I can go into the mask here, select my brush tool, and I can actually add in those little bits and pieces that I missed in her lower hair down here. if you want even. It kind of gets covered up, but you could put some color back into this little bracelet. Might be a nice accent. Okay, so generally this is what it should look like. If you remember from the other tutorials we did, Control 0 gives you like a full screen image of whatever your document is. Okay, so already we could kind of stop here and you could say, hey, this is a pretty cool artistic take on a portrait. One of the things though that I noticed from the original that I did as a test is her eyes are really, really dark. And it would be kind of cool if we could brighten those up a little bit. So we're going to actually create a specific adjustment layer specifically for her eyes to give us a much more defined eyeball. So if you zoom in here and you take the lasso tool, we want to lasso, and you don't need to be very accurate. Just get around her eye like that. And then you have to hold shift and you're going to go around her other eye. So one eye, hold shift, around eyeball number 2. So you get these two funny looking shapes going on. Both of those two shapes are going to help us define where we want to make our next adjustment layer. Okay, for this next adjustment layer, lo and behold, we're working with colors and stuff, so we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to add a hue and saturation layer. Only difference is this time when we add our hue and saturation layer, if you look at what the mask looks like, the mask is all black except for the two little white areas where her eyes are. And the reason for that is because we had pre-selected what we wanted to mask out, or excuse me, to have masked. So it kind of did it in the inverse. If I backed up one step and did Control Z, I would get my selection back, and then I could take this selection and go select inverse. So now it's going to select everything outside of where I've got selected. And now when I create my adjustment layer, my mask is the reverse. So I have an all white mask and just the eyes black. Whichever way you want to do it, it doesn't really make a difference. It will do the exact same thing. Oh, maybe it won't actually. Let's find out what it does. So this hue and saturation layer, we're going to double click on here to bring up the panel, and we're going to go colorize. Oh, so we do need to do it the other way. Okay, good. So we want to have it be selected just the eyeballs. When we add in that hue and saturation layer, we have it be all black except for the two little dots for her eyes. And now when we select color eyes, it's going to give us some color on her eyes. Now, we need to fiddle with the saturation and the lightness of this color and the tone of this color to try and affect some change. Now it might need to be really, really, really bright, and then we can always tone it back after. We can make it faded out. But let's see, I want to have a similar kind of pinkishy color to the rest of this image. Okay. And then obviously her eyeball is not this big. So I'm going to go into my mask here, select my layer mask and my brush tool, and I'm going to paint out a little bit more of this mask and make it more accurate to just having her eyeball be what's included in this selection. Okay. So we're painting out around her pupil. Essentially trying to change the color of her iris. Now, in real life, her eyes are like that dark brown color, so they don't pop super well in a darker image like this that we started with. So her pupil is actually quite large, but regardless, this gives us a pretty good approximation of what's going on. Now, to make it look more natural, we would go to opacity, and we would take some of this opacity down a little bit so it looks a lot more like a contact versus just like we've painted her eyeball kind of thing. Okay, so it's a little bit of a delicate balance. The nice thing about it being an adjustment layer is you can go back into the settings and you can fiddle with the settings. Maybe you want less saturation, more brightness. Maybe you want less brightness, more saturation. Maybe you want to tweak the tone of it a bit. Essentially, you just want to get it to where it kind of looks like her eyes are that pinkish color as well. Okay? And it doesn't have to be a lot. Again, you don't want them to look fake. You just want it to have that tone as if her eyes were like reddish purple as opposed to another color. And again, you can fiddle with the colors. Maybe you want more of a blue color tone. There's lots of different shades that you can come up with. I kind of like the purple matching the lips a little bit better. Okay? So that would be how to change someone's eye color. In a darker photo like this, it's not ideal. It's a lot harder to see the change, but that subtle little change really gets things to blend in and work a little bit better. Okay, so our final two steps are adding a bit of an overlay, or what would be considered a texture overlay. There's a few different ways to do this, and I'll show you some that don't work very good and some that do work reasonably well. So again, making sure we're underneath this top hue and saturation layer. This one has to stay on the top because it's the one giving us all of our color. We need to stay underneath that one. And if we go File, Place, we can place any one of these images. The one that we are going to place right away is this space kind of nebula looking purple thing. And it will show up. Actually, let's put this on top. I just realized that saturation layer is going to do some weird stuff. But if you rotate it, so hold shift and rotate it, we'll keep it rotating in nice increments. And you can scale this up to fit on top of your image. Hit enter. And there we have our space scene. But this hue and saturation is monkeying with the color. So I'll move it to the top and you'll end up with this purple look again. And then we don't actually want it to be 100% opacity. We want to kind of see through it and see what's going on. So you can take this layer and go to your opacity of the layer and just bring it down a little bit. I would say 70-ish, 75 tends to work pretty good. And then we're basically going to poke a hole in the middle of it. We're going to use our mask tool again. So go to mask and it creates a blank layer mask. And now we use our brush with black ink. And we are going to paint really big on her face. I'm going to soften my brush up so it's not a hard line. And we're going to bring back in some of the definition in her hair. This side of her hair I'm going to leave kind of faded out like this a little bit. I want the definition on this side of her hair. And I definitely want some definition in her hand area. But underneath on her shirt, not as important. I kind of like the space theme coming in and being able to cover that up. Now, even though we've done an opacity of 75%, maybe you would want, maybe you want a little bit of her shirt to show through. The way you can do that is by changing the opacity of your brush. So by having my brush set to 33%, now when I paint, it's not fully black, it's more of like a gray. And so it will take out some of the effect, but it will also leave some of the effect. Whenever you do stuff like this, make sure that you go back and reset your brush back to 100%, or the next time you try to paint, it's going to give you a really, really weird result. The brush opacity is in the top here in this like toolbar. So if you change it to like 30%, now you're not painting nearly as dark, and so it only affects part of the image. It takes it out. If you look at your mask up close, the bottom here where I painted is gray, and the center where her face is black. So that way you can take out some of the sparkle star background thing, but not all of it. Something that I didn't do in the original that I think I'm going to try just for fun here is let's add in that picture of a moon with the big planetary thing going on. So we're going to place linked, and we're going to place in this Cosmog picture, and again scale it up nice and big. We're going to put it in the bottom corner here. Now when you push enter, you've got this planet here, but we don't want it as dark as it, or we don't want it to be as like square shape kind of thing. So first off, we're going to play with the blending mode, see which one of these blending modes might actually work for us, if any of them. There's usually one that gives us kind of a cool, hard light's not bad. Luminosity's not bad. Screen is not terrible. What you can do then is take another mask, obviously, your brush tool, make sure that it's nice and soft, and you're going to brush out this hard line here and kind of brush around the moon, so you get a little bit of the glow from the moon and from that moon layer, but so that the majority of the image is back to what it was before. Now again, this might look just as good if you did it with like dissolves. Kind of cool actually. Kind of looks like the planet is like exploding. And then you could change the opacity to bring it down a little bit. Different blending layers do different things with when you change the opacity. Even just normal might look cool. You get a little more of the tones of the moon. Oops. But you can still kind of see her like hair and stuff. I kind of like it with just normal. And change that opacity just a titch. Okay, the last thing we're going to do, just for fun, is we are going to put in some like clouds. And then colorize those clouds to kind of match the rest of the image here. So again, file, place linked. we're going to place in this sky photo here. And then we're going to take this sky photo and again scale it to match the width of the screen here. And it needs to end up somewhere down at this bottom chunk. Then hit enter. Now, this is a little bit different. This image, we're going to blend it using a method for color selecting things. Because this image is pretty much two tones, it's generally blue and white and has some blue-white kind of mix, almost like a gray mix. It's a perfect candidate for using the color selection or color range. So with this layer selected, you would go to select color range, and it brings up this color range selector thing, and it gives you a magic wand tool, which is like a color selector magic wand. So if I clicked on her hair, it would select her hair. If I click on her forehead, it selects the tones and colors in her forehead. Similarly, if I click on this blue here, blue becomes the main color. Now this particular blue, there's a couple different tones of the blue that I want to get rid of. So we're going to actually click once. And if you hold the shift key, you want to click a couple times in this blue area so that the computer captures a few different blue pixels to compare to. And then if you notice here on the right hand side, it has selected all the blue in the sky and kind of down into this like shadowy shaded area. And depending on how hard I go with the fuzziness, it'll either select just the colors I selected, or it starts to select colors that are around where I selected. And it's okay if it starts to select stuff up here, because we're only masking out the bottom image. So really that's the most important. So find yourself a happy medium. We don't want it to be too light, but we don't want it to be not enough either. So I would say in the 140 range, give or take, seems to work pretty good. Okay? And what this is doing for us by doing this color range selection, it's going to create a selection that we can then turn into a mask and get rid of the blue. And it creates a really cool effect. You probably could use this same effect for that moon picture, but there's a lot of the same tone in the moon one, so it doesn't work as well. Once you have your color range selection made, you would simply just click OK, and it's now going to select a whole bunch of different stuff all the way around your image. Now, similar to the eyeballs, if we were to create the mask now, it would keep all the blue part and get rid of the clouds. But we actually want the reverse of that. We want to keep the clouds and get rid of the blue and everything else. So we need to go select inverse, and it'll just flip and select the clouds now and leave the sky out of the picture. And then when I select my mask here, if I add my layer mask, I'm now left with these really cool wispy clouds floating over top of our little world thing here. And if you want to get really, really trippy, you can actually create multiple versions of these two layers, the planet and the clouds, and you'd be able to get some of the clouds behind and some of the clouds in front, right? So if I created a second layer here of clouds, I'm just going to go down to my new layer, and it will create a duplicate layer. And I'm going to put one of them underneath the planet and one of them over top of the planet. And now when I adjust the mask accordingly, so the one that's underneath the planet I need this part to disappear. These ones in front are fine, but I don't want them so thick, so I'm going to actually get rid of them. So I paint with a black brush. Paint with a black brush over top, and I'm going to get rid of the second version of those clouds that are on top. And I'm only going to keep the part that's underneath in the back. And then on my top set of clouds, the part that's above in front of this planet, I need to make those disappear, so that now the clouds are only coming out from behind the planet, and the planet is kind of sticking out. Oops. Sticking out the front here. Now you have to be careful, because it will, if you make too much of an adjustment here, it'll goober up your mask, and it won't be as nice and detailed as it had been. Because when you do that color selection masking, it really works really well to get rid of just those fine details and stuff. Again, this is a situation where painting with a brush that's not so opaque, so like 15%, allows me to take little bits in and out and kind of create some of that fog aspect. And really blend things together. You can also fiddle with the opacity of the clouds. If you want a little less boldness to them, they can be toned back a bit. You could also use a really big brush and using black, and you can kind of paint on the edges of the clouds. And it's going to get rid of just a little bit of those clouds. Kind of making them a little softer and blend in a little bit better with the image underneath. Okay. If you want the clouds to be more of like a purple cloud, if you notice now we've gone above that hue and saturation layer. So you could take all of these cloud layers and the planet and move them underneath the hue and saturation layer, and it's going to make them more of that like purple wispy green. Only problem is now your space layer is above that, so that's not going to work as well for you. You want to keep them above, but it means that we have to add a new layer to these that only affects these layers. And the problem with that is that they're 3 individual layers, and it's really hard to adjust them all together. So we actually need to do what's called, if we right click with these 3 layers selected and convert them to a smart object, it will now shrink those 3 layers into 1 layer, which if I double clicked on this, I could still go back and edit it later, but it allows me to add a hue saturation layer above it and to add some more of the like purple tones in to kind of make it match. Now ignore her head and stuff because it's changing her head. We want to kind of try to remember what it used to look like before. And if you click this little box at the bottom here with an arrow, it will tell this blending, it'll tell this hue and saturation layer, I only want you to edit just the one single layer that's below here. And so now you can see better, it's only affecting the purple in the clouds and the tone of those clouds versus the entire sky. So now if I get it blended into somewhere in this neck of the woods, it looks much more natural, really blends in really well, and I think overall we have a really cool effect that I would hope that this model actually kind of likes. And it's just a really stylized way to take what was a good portrait, a normal portrait, and turn it into something a little bit different, a little bit outside of the box that is a little bit more creative. So that is how to create a stylized epic portrait in Photoshop using blending layers and masks. Lots of the same techniques over and over create really cool effects. The biggest thing with Photoshop is to have fun, play around, try different things. So yeah, I encourage you to try things like this on your own and just have some fun seeing what you can create using the blending modes and different kinds of layer masks and layer features and stuff. Have a good time until we see you again. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Bye-bye.